Hello, dear Janeites. My name is Laura Ingalls Gunn. I fell in love with Jane Austen as a young girl, and my delight in her literature has never wavered. In this video created for JaneCon, I will be talking about how I created a small Jane Austen-inspired garden in my backyard and the Regency era gardening clothes I made to wear while doing it. This past winter, almost all of the days were dreary. Overcast skies and abundant rain left me longing for brighter days. In an effort to look towards spring, I thought about what I would want to plant in my backyard garden. And like a lot of other people, I had really missed seeing my friends. I thought perhaps that if I planned an outdoor garden party, we would safely be able to see one another. This led me to think about how much Jane Austen admired a lovely garden. In her letter to friends and family members, she often mentioned the various flowers and trees being planted where she lived, as well as the food that was growing in her kitchen garden. In looking at Georgian England, specifically during the years that Jane Austen lived, which was 1775 to 1817, the Romantic landscape designers such as Lancelot Capability Brown, William Kent, and Humphrey Repton had transformed many of the great estates to what we still today associate with the quintessential pastoral English garden look. Prior to this, there had been formal geometric gardens. You can still see one today at Versailles. But in England, most of the estates were transformed into a more naturalistic style. The science of botany had also broadened during this time. Glassed-in greenhouses and conservatories provided warm environments for new and exotic plants that had been brought back from recent explorations of other lands by the British Navy and explorers such as Captain James Cook. It should be noted that this was the result of colonization. Many countries and their people were exploited by and for wealthy British landowners. The pineapple, a symbol of great wealth for General Tilney, would not have tasted as sweet if the true cost had been considered. When you know better, you do better. So today I am drinking a cup of fair trade tea. All 6 of Jane Austen's novels feature gardens in some form or another. She often used examples of gardens and landscapes to assist the reader in noticing the various qualities of her characters and how they lived. In Mansfield Park, Mr. Rushworth's gardens need to be improved, but perhaps that also applies to the man himself. General Tilney's amazing kitchen garden in Northanger Abbey clearly makes the reader aware of his abundant assets. Mr. Collins' parsonage garden, as well as what is probably the most beloved estate, Pemberley in Pride and Prejudice, provide clues to developing these characters such as Darcy, as well as their interactions with others. During this journey, I became aware that Mr. Knightley's strawberries in Emma means so much more if you have an understanding of gardening in the time of Georgian England. Whereas we can get strawberries year-round, they were a very rare and precious commodity during Jane Austen's time. As I began to pore over books on Georgian gardening and various seed catalogs, I considered that much of England has a hardiness of 9 on the USDA zone scale. Where I live has a growing zone of 8. So some of the plants that work well in Britain would not flourish in my own backyard. I had made a list of the flowers, trees, fruits, and vegetables that Jane had specifically mentioned in her books and letters. And you can find a free printable of this list on my website. I also listed some of the gardening books that I read and articles that I found interesting or useful. I'll link to my website down below in the description box. You just have to click on the words "click more" and it will open the box up. So with the list in hand, I selected plants and flowers that I thought would work well in my yard, and they included foxgloves, sweet william, roses, and more. Whenever I could, I selected heirloom or non-GMO varieties. Once the various seeds and bulbs arrived, I needed only to wait for the appropriate planting times. And while I waited, I decided to go one step further. I wanted to dress in Regency era garb while I gardened. This led to an entirely different rabbit hole of what gardening attire might look like in Jane's day. I settled on a Regency short gown paired with a suspendered skirt. A video of the process of making the skirt, as well as some of the early garden prep work, was shared last January, and I'll link to that video down below. To create the short gown, I used a pattern that I had made previously. It was Simplicity 8941 by American Duchess. The next few segments of the video will cover how it was altered into a short gown. I'll also be sharing some different snapshots of the garden during various blooming periods. So for the pattern pieces, I am using the Simplicity 8941, which I had done the dress a few months ago, and so I knew I needed to lengthen it as well as increase the coverage over the bust line. And so for the lining, I just repeated the lengthening and the addition. And then going over towards the side back, you can see that it also will measure up. And then for this piece, it's also lengthened. So I also lengthened this quite a bit because that dress really has a sharp angle, and I didn't want that for this particular style of garment. If you remember, I also had a lot of problems with the sleeve, so I cut out a sleeve from one of the other Butterick Regency garments, and I wanted it to be long sleeve because, of course, women in the Regency era, if they were outdoors, they wanted to protect their skin. So fingers crossed it'll go together smoothly. This is the 3 pattern pieces that make up the bodice sewn together. So here we have one side of the very long flap piece, and a channel has been created that I'll put a drawstring through. So the pattern calls for 5/8 inch seam allowances, so you can see that I've done that. I always press out my seams. Now, to get the drawstring channel, it's a little bit of tricky sewing. You have to do some stay stitching and then clip to the stitching and then press it over to create a very thin channel through which I will thread my twill tape, a thin twill tape through and pull it through. And then that gets gathered up. So slow and steady wins this race. You just really have to fold, press, and this is the edge that will get joined to basically the skirted bottom piece. And again, with the lining going in, it will create a channel. I hope that helps and makes sense. The interior lining is constructed very similarly, with the exception of you do hem the bottom, and these two flaps are going to cross over in the front, and this provides coverage underneath the exterior bodice that will be gathered. So if there is any gaping, this will offer you a second layer. I wanted to share with you where I deviated from the pattern. The pattern had you attach the front of the skirt to the front of the bodice before you attach the lining, but I did not do that. I somewhat bag lined the lining around the neckline and then flipped it over, and then I attached my skirt, and the back was gathered, the front section was left straight. And why I did that is because that's where your drawstrings are. So this is where my top drawstring is, and then this seam where I joined the top of the bodice to the bottom skirt section, I'm going to fold it under and stitch a little channel for the second drawstring, and then that will end at my side seam just as it did up here. Okay, and I reinforced that really well. So I'll do the same right at the side seam. So this is where my second drawstring channel is going to go. And then the back, I heavily gathered it. And there is a center seam where I joined my two rectangles. I don't know if I said it before, the rectangles were 45 inches long and 15 inches wide. So I sewed two of the pieces together and I just encased it. In case the wind blows up and you can see the back of my skirt, you know, that way the seam looks finished. And again, just repeating it on the same. So once I have my channel in, again, your front flaps stay loose, and then I'll come back here to the back and then just turn the lining over the back of what is in essence the waistline. So this will be left free, and this section that's a little bit longer gets turned under, and I'll hand stitch that. And So we had originally this plastic lattice work around our air conditioning, and the gecko supervisor is back at work watching how my husband transformed some extra fencing that we had on hand to hide the modern convenience of our air conditioner. I think it turned out really great. What do you say, boss? I have continued to work on the garden. By April, it was just on the verge of being truly glorious, and I crossed my fingers that everything would be in full bloom for the Regency era garden party that I hosted in early May. Now tomorrow I will share a video of all my guests in their beautiful finery, taking garden strolls, playing lawn games, and much more. You won't want to miss it. So please hit the subscribe button in the lower corner to be notified. In closing, I would like to give my deepest thanks to all the wonderful volunteers who have made JaneCon possible. And also, thank you very much for watching. You guys, I'm trying to dig. What are you doing? How am I supposed to get any digging done? I have Pony on my lap, so I moved down, and guess who followed me? They are after something now, so I'm gonna try and move down again. Oh, you dogs. Go, Pony, go. Get it, Pony. Get it.